guys, this is Carrie, your watercolor misfit, and as requested, today I will be teaching a real-time painting of how to paint a realistic pine cone. Now, what you're seeing above is a preview of what I'm going to actually be teaching you today. However, I'm not going to go into as much detail about how I actually mix these brown colors because I have already taught that in another video. I'm going to link that video on the screen right here and also in the description box below. So be aware that I'm just mainly going to be talking about how I approached painting this and what colors I used where, not really the mixing part in this video. Now, if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the supplies that I'm going to be using today for this illustration are going to be the scarlet red, green grass, true blue, orange, violet, lemon yellow, P.H. Martin concentrated watercolors, as well as 3 round brushes. This one is a 6, this one is a 4, and then this is a round liner brush. It's a 00. It's one of the smallest you can get. Plus, of course, acrylic paint. As I was painting, it got a little bit dark, so I used this for correcting. Let's go ahead and begin. Alright, so I'm going to try and do this where you can see my palette the whole time as well as the illustration. We'll see how this goes. The first thing that I'm going to be doing is painting all the lighter colors, which I'll be using a lot of yellow and oranges on that side, and then I'll be adding my darker, cooler colors, which will be more of my probably this color, the green and the red together with maybe a little bit of purple and blue. So anyway, this is where we're starting. And I'm gonna admit right now, anytime I start a painting, I always get really nervous. I don't know why, but drawing it does not bother me, but painting it always freaks me out when I first start putting paint to paper. But once I start getting going, I really get into the mode of it and I really like it. So the first thing I'm going to do, there's no paint in my brush right now, just water, and I'm wetting the paper where I want to put my lighter yellows, and I'm going to paint wet and wet. Getting back to that anxiety that I have before painting, I'm wondering if you guys feel the same way before painting or before drawing or even before test taking. I get the same feeling before a test. I just kind of wonder what you guys experiences with that, so leave a comment down below and let me know if you guys feel the same way right before painting. Alright, I'm going to time-lapse this section a little bit because all I'm doing is putting down one layer of yellow paint. Now here's where I'm going to slow it down again. The next thing that I'm doing is taking my brown after I've laid that yellow down and that yellow is still wet. Then I am laying down brown on top of that and letting the two just merge together freely and do whatever they want on the paper. This is the best way to get a really nice wet and wet technique together. Now, the next color that I'm going to add is this little purplish hue color, and you'll probably start noticing it now. I didn't say it earlier, but I am not painting these colors on. I'm actually only dabbing my brush onto the paper and allowing the paint from my brush to just flow freely in any way that it wants to. I'm just making sure that when I dab my brush down, it's in an area where I do want that stronger hue of color to bleed from. So that's a little tip for you. Alright, so I'm going to let this little section dry and I'm going to move down a bit, and I do have paint in my brush still from this area, but it doesn't really matter. I am going to be painting this side a darker brown. So this is fine to just kind of have, but I tend to do about 3 or 4. So you can kind of see what I'm wetting down. 3 or 4 little pine cone petals, I guess, part of the cone. And then I add, and I'm mainly sticking, I really like this orange blue color over here with a little bit of yellow, so I'm mainly moving some of my colors over. But what I'm doing is wetting my lightest color first, and then in the areas that I've cross-hatched, let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. The areas where I have cross-hatched, I am adding my darker colors and just kind of letting them bleed out. So it creates a really nice watercolor texture effect. Alright, this is a dry brush that I'm going to take, and if you notice in this area it's starting to really bleed a little bit funky, and I don't want that. So I'm taking a dry brush and just kind of smoothing it out. Alright, so that is the basic premise of just building and building on top of each other with these little pine cone petals. So as you can tell, I'm time-lapsing forward until we get to the next step, because basically you're doing the same thing over and over again with all of these little petals. Alright, so I'm just gonna tell you something real quick. What I've been doing, you've probably noticed, is I'm basically taking my base colors that I already mixed, my pre-mixed colors of the contrasting colors, which is the orange and blue, and then the red and green, and then the yellow and blue. And then what I'm doing is, if I feel like the color, the brown, needs to be warmer, I might add a yellow to it. But if I feel like it needs to be a cooler color, I might add, normally I'm adding purple, but I might also add a little bit of blue or a little bit of green, depending on what I feel like the brown needs to be. I'm going to show you right now kind of what I'm doing, because I'm going to do it right now. These little ones right here, they're a little bit cooler than what I really wanted. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of orange and yellow and mix them together. And I'm going to get a warmer color, and I'm going to glaze on top where I think the warm sunlight would kind of hit. And some of these will still remain kind of that color, but I want to keep it kind of uniform a little bit in its color. And then I'm going to take a dry brush and just kind of blend it in with what's already there. So you guys kind of got an idea of how I'm painting this. Alright, I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and then I'm going to add my blues and greens into it to deepen the shadows on top. Alright, so I've let this dry a little bit. It's not completely dry, but it's close enough to where I want it. And I am going to be adding deeper shadows. I probably put it a little bit darker than I should have, but that's okay. We can just continue to work with it. I'm gonna add some blues and greens and purples to where the shadows should be and just glaze on top to make it pop a little bit more. So what I'm gonna do is actually kind of mix these together until I get a nice kind of gray blue right now, and that looks nice. And then I'm gonna add this where I think my darker shadows will go. Once I got my main shadows done, another thing that I did was I went back over the petals individually, and with my liner, my smallest liner brush, that 00, I added little lines in, just not all over, but just in certain places, especially towards the tips of my petals of that pine cone, because if you notice, there's always some age and some roughness on those tips. So that's just something else that I added to give a more realistic look to this pine cone. Alright, and the last thing that we're going to be doing is actually correcting my mistake. I went a little bit too dark. It's not horrible, but it's just a little tad bit too dark for my liking for this pine cone. So the way I'm going to fix that is use acrylic white paint. And this is just some cheap brand that I bought at Michael's several years ago, and it's lasted for a very long time. And all I do is I put some on my plate. This is a plate specifically for acrylic paints and ink. Don't want to mix this onto your watercolor palette because it will stick and it will dry and it will not come up. And I just water it down with basic water, nothing special, no oils or anything like that. And I create a glaze with it and just put it in spots where I feel like the light would be really touching my pine cone sharply and harshly, so that it almost looks white, because it is, when you're glazing acrylic paint on top of watercolor, it is not going to look like stained paper. So you have to be careful how much you put on it. It has this film to it and kind of graininess. So all I'm doing is basically lining certain portions of my pine cone with this color just to give that extra light. And this is something that I actually do regularly. I have a horrible problem with painting too dark because I just get too enthusiastic, and a lot of times your watercolor paint does dry a bit darker than when it is wet. So it's something that you just have to kind of learn, and this is an option that I have used over the years to help correct that. As I time-lapse this forward, I want to ask you guys, please, 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 hit that like button if you like the style of this tutorial. I'm trying something new and I need to know if you guys like this style. And that like button is a great way to communicate with me and tell me whether you like it or not. And that's it. I am done. No brown was used at all to make this pine cone, and one reason I really like doing this challenge for myself, and I do it every once in a while, is I feel like by using the colors here and not using the manufactured colors brown, I feel like it gives a more realistic look to your painting. Come on, focus. I feel like it gives a more realistic look to your painting because when you look out in nature, brown is not just one straight color, it's multiple colors all mixed together. So anyway, I hope this helps you guys and I hope you enjoyed this challenge. I will see you next time.